Hi there, New Minds Nation. Ben Cook here, host of the New Minds podcast. You have tuned in to episode 33 of the podcast, a fantastic conversation with Jeff Tybrurski, who has created a new platform for not just financial literacy, but the development of kind of future-proofing job skills and tuning into your passion as young as possible to make the correct decisions about college and so on. The reason I am inserting myself in here is because in the original recording, we had some technical glitches with the sound the first few minutes, and the original recording does not have any audio for my long intro of Jeff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do an intro right here and then cut straight to the original recording where you won't miss a beat on our fascinating conversation. Okay, so let me introduce our guest for episode 33, Jeff Tybrurski. Now, Jeff was an engineer for many years, and then he kind of migrated over into the financial world and was an analyst. He has an MBA in finance, and his latest manifestation is as an author and a platform creator, an entrepreneur who has this vision, who has this mission to educate parents and young people on not just financial literacy, but how to kind of tune in to your passion early so you can make smart, valuable choices in the direction of your career and your studies early so that you can avoid unnecessary debt, for example, and kind of get on track to a career and not just a degree. So that kind of sets the stage for a conversation. There are some great insights. I love how Jeff kind of talks us through his own path as a way to sort of highlight the importance of the stages of his platform. So without further ado, I'm going to cut straight over to the interview. I hope you enjoy. Here we are, episode 33.
That's your passion. I'd probably discourage you from going to NYU for $80,000. Okay, you may not be able to get out of that hole. So that I get worked up and I get almost enraged at how the system is a bit broken. Frankly, I think the schools are very expensive, kind of ridiculously expensive, probably more than they can justify. And I think it's a self-perpetuating cycle that actually encourages that and supports it. And I go into it kind of why I think it's a broken system. And that's kind of one of my first lessons, is acknowledge it's a broken system. And then I'll tell you how to deal with the system.
Right. Yeah. So I like how you're very personal and open about your own journey too. Like you're speaking as someone who made the mistakes. And so in your case, I think in our conversation, you were saying how you were a math whiz. You were really good at math, and engineering seemed like the natural path. So you went ahead and you went to school to get your engineering degree and kind of followed that track. I would like to put a hypothetical at you based on what you know now, like the wise Sherpa that you are. What could you have done differently? Like maybe you would have never gotten to this level of wisdom if you didn't, but what could you, if you were coaching a younger version of yourself in high school or at the cusp of college, what would you have coached him to do?
Yeah. So I would tell, and I tell these families and high school kids and young adults, that old expression, it sounds kind of trite, do a job you love and you never work a day in your life, but it's so true, right? And everybody's heard it and everybody kind of nods their head, sure. But I just want to keep pushing. No, really take it seriously, because I did not. So my dad was an engineer. My brother was in college at the time to be an engineer. I was good at math. I did well on the SAT, the math portion at least. And I just assumed I'm going to be an engineer, but I didn't know what that really meant. And I did really great in high school. But, high school, I probably just was one of those kids that kind of colored within the lines. But then in college, I barely kept my head above water to get the engineering degree. And then when I came out of school and worked for General Electric and the Naval Nuclear Program, the subs and aircraft carriers, I really could not stand it from like day one So if I could go back as a 17, 18-year-old, late 70s, early 80s, and figure out, hey, what are my passions? Can I connect the dots? I would say I'm pretty good at math, but I love baseball. I mean, to this day, I still love baseball.
Yeah.
And I played baseball. I could throw pretty hard, for an 18-year-old, but I was never going to make the majors, that's for sure. But could I have put some more thought into actually having a career that was baseball related? And if I had connected the dots, I would have realized in the late 70s and early 80s, they were taking this 100-year-old game, but starting to apply some new statistics and a new look and a way to look at it through a new lens. And you never know. I really could have been on the ground floor of Moneyball and working at a ballpark and working with major league players. But you never know. I'll never know because I didn't do it. But I encourage people to really try to figure out their passions and connect the dots and see if something works.
Yeah, I love that. And I think more people are echoing that sentiment pretty loudly. I don't know if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, also known as Gary V. He's kind of really big right now with millennials, but one of his big talking points is that, like, stop listening to this script that says you have to go to school necessarily. Like you said, some careers, in some cases, it's absolutely necessary and right and fruitful.
Hey, at some schools, at some careers, you even know you're going to need a master's degree. So even then, my book goes into kind of a checklist of if you know you're going to need a master's degree, that's even more support to not go into too much debt in your undergraduate degree, because to get into the graduate school, you need good grades in undergrad and a good entrance exam. Those should be your focus.
Yeah.
And then your final degree can be the school that you're more proud of or whatever, but it's still going to come down to you. And I really want you to minimize debt because, I teach financial literacy, which means I've got that compounding bug about how money can grow. So I want you to be saving as early as possible. I'd rather have someone in their 20s saving money and growing it, beginning to grow it, rather than to be paying back a loan with interest in their 20s.
Yeah. So we have a comment here live from one of our super fans, Mr. T, also known as Doug. He's actually a New Minds team member too. He says he strongly agrees with your point that we should consider a shorter path with less or zero debt. Those who are out of work now are being valued for experience more than their years in school. So just kind of reframing. Like you said, building the experience. It's less about the degree itself than it is about the experience. And that kind of transitions, sorry to interrupt, into like the second phase of this, which is the adaptability piece. So here we are, we found a job, it's stable. So you're saying we can't sit back on our haunches and just rest for 30 years. We're going to have to adapt.
Okay. Well, trust me. As an engineer who used to work in old economy paper mills, steel mills, paper plants, auto plants, I ran into my share of co-workers or folks that I just dealt with on a daily basis who had the attitude of, hey, I'm in Rochester, New York, home of Kodak, and the Kodak folks, they would get a job at 18 and pretty much assume if I can survive 30 years, I'm going to have this job with the company for 30 years and a good pension. But, back in the 90s, when I was an engineer, I also read a good book by Andy Grove, the founder of Intel, called Only the Paranoid Survive. And he made a really stern speech to his employees saying, hey, the world is so dynamic and technology is changing and global competition is so intense. A company itself doesn't know it's going to survive or exist in 30 years. So how the heck could it promise you a job for 30 years? So he was making the point that, frankly, nobody owes you a career. It sounds harsh, but he was saying it's your responsibility to stay employable, to stay marketable, to stay flexible. And he actually said, pretend, even if you work for a big company, pretend you're a sole proprietor and your business is you and you're competing against millions of other people with businesses of one person. Mm-hmm. And it leads to this whole thought process and checklist, because I'm an engineer. So, what does that mean? It means you need to accept and embrace change. You need to know it's coming. You'll probably have multiple jobs or even careers like me. You probably need to be your own advocate, your own brand manager. You need to be able to articulate your skills, and otherwise you might fall through the cracks nowadays. And you really need to keep investing in yourself. You need to realize that the end of school is the beginning of the race, not the end of the race. You have your whole life. You've got to show people you constantly want to learn. You got to build on your strengths, and you got to attack your weaknesses, and you got to put yourself out there once in a while, and get out of your comfort zone, because you'll expand your abilities doing that.
So in terms of, going back to that, like you said, kind of like really reality check from the Intel. Right. What was his name again?
Andy Grove.
Andy Grove, yeah.
The founder,
kind of his reality check. Going back to that, in the context of, today technology changes at an even faster pace.
Right.
And so what, from your experience and what in your advice, what are the skill sets that we do invest in when we're kind of like constantly renewing ourselves? What are the key skills to do that? Because it's not necessarily like a finite technology. It's something bigger.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question because that too is changing. I think the standard answer is, be on the side of change. So if artificial intelligence and robotics and whatever is taking over, if you're a coder, you probably have a better shot than someone who's working at a toll booth their job had just got replaced by the tag on the windshield, right? But actually, I think it could come full circle too in the future, which is the computers, as smart as they're going to be, they might even be the hub of a doctor's office. You could have people kind of like hub and spoke with the computer in the middle, or attorneys, because they can access all the information. But really, the old skills of communication may find their day again. So I think you've got to consider it all. You've got to evaluate if your interest and passion is in a particular industry. You want to do some research to see if there's threats to that industry. In the past, the artificial intelligence and robotics have replaced, welding in an automotive plant, or the toll booth attendant, or the ATMs replaced a lot of tellers. But I could see a day where a pharmacist may not be needed, which a pharmacist is a pretty good job, right? But a computer may actually know all the interactions better, right?
Yeah. So
you've got to think it through and realize it's really dynamic. And just something else that I preach is know your generic skill set. It's just maybe a term I made up, but I was never a great engineer. I proved to be a poor, true number crunching design engineer, but I could see a system, understand it, and explain it. So I realized I had the ability to take the complex and explain it. And that led to some initiatives where, like, I created an internal school to train people, because I could take our complex investment strategies and explain them to our new people. And I created a mentoring program. So I took these generic skills. Maybe I wasn't the best analyst, but I could explain our systems and become a trainer. Things like that. So you've got to constantly review through your life. What do you do well? What do you not do well? Can you try to improve, but at least build on those strengths to reinvent yourself? I mean, I've had multiple times where my job literally went away overnight, and I had to figure out, how am I going to add value to this firm if I'm going to keep a job?
Yeah, what's transferable? So I want to piggyback on that with two things. Number one is there's a website, I don't know if you've seen it. It's called willcomputerstakemyjob.com. That's literally the URL. And if you go,
I love it.
They have, you type in a type of job like accountant or, school teacher, right, or toll booth attendant, and they'll say, based on their research, the probability of your job being replaced by AI or machine learning or robots, right? It's really interesting. Some of the things that come back are interesting, like accountant is like a 94% chance of a robot taking it in the next 10 years.
It's purely rules based, right? That's exactly what a computer can do.
Like you were saying. And another thing is, another resource for people to consider, you didn't necessarily call them soft skills, but the UN early in this millennium did research to ask the question, to answer the question, what are the skill sets necessary to thrive in the 21st century? And these became known as the 21st century skills. And there are four in particular that they call the 4 C's. And you've already talked about one, communication. The other 3 are creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And I think those all fall into like what you call the generic skill set. Like if you have those,
and I would call them the soft skills too.
Yeah.
Soft skills, EQ. There's IQ, maybe how smart you are, but then EQ is like your emotional quotient. But that's really what people get promoted on, is their ability to communicate, manage, listen, have empathy. Right. Things like that.
Right.
And, to your accountant point, I have a really good friend who's a good accountant, and he would agree with what you said, but then he would also turn it on that adaptability angle. And he would say the best accountants nowadays are not the ones who just know the tax code the best, but are who can work with a small business and show them how they can really grow their business through the numbers, So there's still ways that those accountants are going to survive and adapt, but they're going to be different kinds of accountants.
Yeah, that's the adaptability piece, right? That's perfect.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then we can jump back as needed, but then comes kind of part 3 of your platform and of your book as well, which is the financial literacy piece. And I'm so happy that you didn't just jump straight into that and take the traditional approach of, let's learn how to balance a checkbook, kiddos. It's more about building this framework for life, and financial literacy is just one piece of that, but it's in the service of kind of like your higher purpose. That's what I like about it. So one thing you already mentioned in this conversation, and it's in your book. I had a chance to read through your ebook, and you have a really powerful graph. I mean, you mentioned it verbally when we talked, but then I saw the graph of the difference of just beginning a simple investment in your 20s versus your 30s or your 40s. And just because of compounding, like you said, the math here, the difference is enormous. The difference is absolutely enormous, and that's pretty compelling. So talk about that a little bit, and then talk about how do you convince a 21-year-old that they need to take those $100 and invest them or save them rather than, have that amazing night out?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough task. So I tried to put a lot of thought into it. I spent a few months just seeing what was out there as far as financial literacy technology platforms. And like I said, I was trained to be a bit of a cynic. I was paid to be a cynic. I was paid to find problems and find solutions. And I thought that even those platforms that people had clearly spent millions of dollars building, actually, I talked to people who built them, and the engagement level is really, really low. They end up really just finding people that actually already knew something about financial literacy and are using it more as a resource, a debt calculator or some budget tool.
Right.
But I realized that I do need to be more of that motivational speaker. And my approach is much more about the mindset and the daily lifestyle choices to just take more control of your life and starting early, and then and not emphasizing the math, but I did a little bit of math to your point. So the little bit of math is, I just say, trust me, there's some analysis behind this, but with reasonable assumptions, $1 can double in 10 years. So I just say, if you could save $1 by the time you're 30, that dollar becomes 2 by 40, 4 by 50, 8 by 60. So $8 by the age of 60 because you saved $1 when you were 30. So that extra double is not going from 1 to 2; it's going from 4 to 8, right? So I want people in their 20s to be saving, which means you can't be, barely getting by because you're paying off. The average kid has $30,000 in student debt, but really, the real student debt that people don't talk about are the parent loans, those parent plus loans that have no cap to them, and they can go right up to the cost of the full cost of school. So there's hundreds of thousands of debt there, but there's 1.7 trillion in college debt in total. So I would rather have those kids saving in their 20s and it's that daily lifestyle choice. How many $4 coffees do I need? How many $10 lunches? I want them to really start thinking about the opportunity cost of that money. But then I also realize you got to live your life today. So, I have this expression in the book, what's your butter? Because I was in church once and there was a woman talking who admitted she lived below the poverty line. She was a grandma and she loved to bake. And she said, to be a loving grandma, I need real butter to bake cookies. So she could barely afford it, but she splurged on real butter. So I just say everybody should have their butter. It might be travel or, jet ski, but I'm just saying you can't have 20 butter categories. Have one so you feel good and you live your life.
Yeah.
But for the rest of the part, I want you to understand your finances and manage your finances. But I don't go down the tedious kind of budgeting approach. I give another approach where I want you to approach your money differently. Yeah,
absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about your platform. So your website is on screen right now. It's yourfinancialsherpa.com. And when people go there, they're going to see, like you said, it's not just a book. It's not just a website. It's a platform. So there's a book geared towards parents primarily. There's some audio that is like ready for the younger kids, not younger. Like what would you say is the age range?
I think the high school kids are the best for that.
Yeah.
But, if you took out just a few of the audios on the college decision, the rest of it would apply to somebody kind of just coming out of college or a new hire in their 20s. I think it's quite applicable. And when I'm in a speaking engagement, it's a very age-specific message because I think everyone can benefit. Yeah, but the book is very much about saying, hey, parent, I want to team up with you. Read this. I'm kind of shaking them by the shoulders and saying, this is critical. We got to get this message to your kid. I'm not sure they're going to read the book. If you can get them to read the book, more power to you. But I have these audio files if you need them, but it's kind of the same message. The audio files are a bit more story-based, and the book kind of shows that structure, the framework that's kind of built by an engineer. But the whole idea was to build a simple structure that people always kind of knew where they're at, and they could implement it daily and successfully.
Yeah, and
it's more of a tool.
Yeah, exactly. And like I alluded to earlier, the book is very readable. It's very organized. It's like
very short.
It's short. It's very digestible. It's organized. You have like the roadmap there that kind of, exactly where you are in the process. And, I think it's very balanced. Like you said, it's a little bit shake you by the collar, but at the same time, it's very pragmatic. I mean, it's very, makes a lot of sense. And the audio files. So if I'm a parent listening and I've got a kid in high school right now, I could go out there, read the book myself, get access to the audio files for my kid. How long is each audio chunk?
They're really digestible. So they're 11 total, and they go from 6 minutes to 10 minutes. I think only one is 10 minutes. So 6 to 9 minutes. I think if you made them listen to all 11, it's like an hour and 40 minutes of their life. So space it out once a day. Yeah. But, that's the flip side of this virus too, right? Is it's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of serious stuff going on in the world, but it's also this unique opportunity where families are together in the house. Around here, we're doing some projects. We're painting the basement. We're trying to organize pictures for the first time in our lives. But it's also an opportunity to read more books, to have more conversations, and take a long-term view instead of just being mired in the really short-term concerns right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've been talking a lot about on this segment, actually, is like this one of the silver linings of the situation is the opportunity for parents and their kids to really connect on a deeper level, or for parents to kind of like sink deeper into that space. In terms of like how their kids tick, and what's going on, and how can you connect at a deeper level? This opportunity may never come again for that.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. I think it's a real potential silver lining and I do think that life is going to change after this. I think people are going to challenge the college assumption that everyone should go. I think we're going to challenge global supply chains and dependence and the jobs we've lost in the past. I think that people will just interact differently. I'm not in the view that this is going to be some V-shaped recovery. We turn a light switch on and our lives are back to the way they were in January.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's all negative. There could be some real positives that come out of that too.
Sure. Revaluing, reprioritization of certain things, and collectively adapting, the adaptability piece.
Right.
So, Since one of the main topics here is passion, I don't want to end this conversation without giving you the opportunity to talk about what seems to be one of your passions, and that is your nonprofit.
Oh, yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. And so for about 15 years, I've been involved in a project in Africa. It all began in 2003, actually. A really dynamic, inspirational bishop was at my local church here. And he really put us on the spot and just said, if you really want to help us, it's not just water or funds. We need small businesses. We need more organic growth. That's how communities grow from within. And he's a pretty dynamic guy. So when you shake your head, yes, you just made a lifelong commitment with Bishop Mutombo. So, and we've been working with the communities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And philosophically, it's very much about it's got to be organic and owned and implemented by the locals. So we feel good philosophically about the program, but they have created, with our help, the capacity locally to embrace and support entrepreneurs. And they've created about 10,000 jobs and 2,000 new businesses, and now they're expanding into other African countries and communities. So it's really kind of, it has momentum, but it's on its own now, which was always the design. We're not working on it as hard as we used to.
Yeah, beautiful.
So it was just one of those things that I threw into the mix, engineer, analyst, MBA, CFA, they all sound really kind of black and white, but heading up a group that was made of multiple pastors and nonprofit, fund grant writers, all of a sudden I'm leading this group that was totally different than a room full of engineers or analysts that are just kind of black and white or cutthroat. It was really rewarding, and I took some skills from that too. And that's kind of what I'm all trying to bring together in this new chapter of trying to make a difference with the financial literacy with the younger folks.
Yeah, it seems like you have the kind of mind that's an excellent bridge between these more sort of like binary worlds, whether it's engineering and finance, with kind of like in the ability to communicate on as that bridge with kind of the rest of the world. So I think that's what.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. The Africa project was interesting because, I'm this engineer, task oriented, kind of a bull in a china shop, right? I just want to get it done. So, but I was like that for sure. Staying up all night once in a while, writing grant requests and things. But the group, the dynamic and the personalities and the faith-based aspect just kind of grounded me and helped. The group made better decisions than I ever would have made on my own. So that was a good lesson in life right there.
Yeah, very nice. That's wonderful. So the platform, they can find everything they need at yourfinancialsherpa.com. There they'll have access to the ebook, to the audio files, and just how to get started with the platform.
And they can email me directly. I think, I was in the transition between content creation and really getting out there and turning this into a broader effort when all this happened. So I still think down the road I'll have additional services, more venues like this, more kind of chats and more face-to-face and feedback. But right now it's mostly the book and the audio, and then there's an email and you can reach out to me as well. And the whole Sherpa image is supposed to be, a Sherpa is a guide, right?
Yeah.
But unlike financial firms that are named after the peak or the apex or the pinnacle, I'm focused on base camp. I'm the Sherpa that's providing the guidance and the encouragement and the teaching from the beginning and along the journey. That's the image I'm trying to create.
Yeah. We should have brought that metaphor up early on. We could have threaded it through the whole thing. But yeah, I think that's wonderful. The whole Sherpa image.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks so much. Like you said, the timing was a little bit rough on you with the crisis because you were kind of like mid-launch, but I think you're demonstrating the adaptability that you talk about in the book itself. And, I'm sure you're going to find your footing for the next phase. And I hope a lot of people are exposed to this and can get some benefit.
Well, thanks for your help, and I hope to work with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. By just a little side note, the first 3 minutes we were having some audio trouble, not between you and I, because we were chatting away, but apparently one of my spotters, Mr. T, noticed that they weren't hearing anything, and I went into the software and changed some settings. So about the first 3 minutes are just, people may have missed the intro, in other words. So FYI when this is up on YouTube and everything.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed it. Hope to do it again.
Okay. All right. Take care. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. And thanks everybody for tuning in to the New Minds podcast.